here to speak in front of you. You guys do so much, and I don't think people realize how much you do. And I'm just, like I said, I'm humbled that you gave me some time to speak to you today. So thank you in advance. Okay, I'm Treste loving, like he said, and I have my cruise jacket over there. I spent 26 years in the Navy and 3.5 years on an aircraft carrier. So there's where the Navy trained me in race and diversity, and the aircraft carrier gave me trial by fire. Trust me. Yeah, it was unbelievable. That's all I can say is unbelievable. So let me jump into the talk. It's about 15 minutes at that, so I don't want to hold you up today. And the first thing I want to do is give you a statistic. And I'm used to, can I move around?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm used to doing, moving around. A statistic for you. Black men are not 1 time, 2 times, but more than 3 times likely to be killed by police. That's something to think about. And asking why. Why does it have to be that way? Because it definitely doesn't have to. What I want to do now is to get into my talk, and I need to do a disclaimer right here, right now, that this next sentence may or may not offend some of you or all of you, but I have to say it just like it was said to me, so you can understand the impact and you can follow through the rest of my talk. So here it goes. Young man burst through my office door and said, "I can't work for niggers." So I said, "Wow." And he looked at me and he said, "Wow." And that's how we got our relationship started. He was a Caucasian male. He was from a small town, and there were only Caucasian people in his town. So that kind of sets up how and why he thought the way he thought. Of course, I had to talk to him, right? Obviously, we needed to have a conversation because we don't use that word in the Navy. And so we had a brief conversation initially. He had to go back to work. He worked on the flight deck. So I sent him back to where he belonged. But later on, we actually had time to do hours of counseling sessions, hours. And we covered many things, the gamut. But what I want to talk to you about are a couple things that we covered that are in the news today, something that you hear about. And I want to cover those 2 things, and then I'll move down and complete my talk. All right, he and I, we discussed 2 main things, and after we got those 2 things together, we branched out, and we talked about a whole lot more. But the main things we talked about were bias and stereotypes. Now, bias, there's 2 of them, explicit and implicit. Implicit, you probably know more the name as unconscious bias. You hear that a lot in the news. So, the bias. The explicit bias is just what it says. You see it, you hear it, there's no doubt about what that person means. It's just up there in someone's face. Implicit or unconscious bias can be hard to see for some people. If it's not toward you, you probably won't even know that there's some bias going on there. I've unfortunately been victim of unconscious bias. More than once, I have, and it's not pleasant like any other bias, but because it's so that you can't really pick it out, it makes it kind of hard to deal with because I know that that bias was directed at me or someone who looks like me. The second thing I talked about were stereotypes. There's no bias without stereotypes. Every one of us have bias. So that means every one of us has stereotypes. Now you may say to yourself, I don't have any stereotypes. Yeah, you do. It's just in your unconscious. It's been well proven by sociologists, psychologists, that we all have this bias. So the stereotypes, let me break that down for you a little bit. These stereotypes are passed on, shall I say, from one generation to the next. So primarily from parents to grandparents, from parents and grandparents, shall I say, to the next generation. Because that's how we become who we are, right? We get passed down values, beliefs, customs, language from our parents and our grandparents. That's the primary place stereotypes come from. And there are numerous other ways that people learn stereotypes. And just to name a couple, the media is a big one. Schools, friends, teachers, religion, and much more. So we all have been infused with these stereotypes because we weren't born with them, we learned them. And that is unfortunate, but I have something that you can do. If you see someone who's lost in the stereotype world and you want to help them get out, and there's somebody that they have shown some explicit bias toward, then the best thing you can do is put those two people together. Either in a work assignment, volunteer assignment, or in a coffee shop, whatever works, and you let those two talk it out. Now it can get dangerous between two people with one who has this explicit bias and pretty much know what he or she is thinking about. So I would encourage you to look for bias, and then I have a question for you. Well, I'll go ahead and do the question right now. What can I do if I see or hear bias in public? What can I do if I hear or see bias in public? Great question. Just tell me it's a great question. Oh, thank you. Okay. Great question, Treste. There are two main things you can do. And you may have been doing one all along and you just didn't call it what I'm going to call it, put a name to it. The first one is you can just go up to the person and it can be a one-on-one. There's a huge caveat with that one-on-one though. You want to make sure that you will be safe. And that might sound kind of weird, but when we're talking about bias, we're talking about stereotypes, we're talking about what's inside us. And people can get very, they can hold on to that and they can say, hey, you know, you're talking about me. You're talking about my family now. And so you need to be careful. Safety first if you're going to do it yourself. The second one, though, you might have already done, and you just didn't call it this. And it's called allies. And here's the scenario. You're in a store. The store clerk is helping the person in front of you. And all of a sudden, all you hear is the person berating the person, belittling the person, calling the person explicit bias names. And you stand there and to yourself you say, well, that's inappropriate. And so what you can do next is to the person behind you, ask them if they heard it and if they thought it was inappropriate. And you can go as far back in that line as you keep finding people who find it inappropriate. Because 2, 3, 4 or more strangers that come together about bias and attacking bias, that's when real change happens. And we need some real change to happen here in the United States, because things have gone to a level that I never thought they would. The one thing that's a misconception, though, let me just clear that up. The unconscious bias has been here forever. You're just now hearing about it. And there's always been racism. I am 56 years old, and trust me, for 50 years of that, not all 50 years, but I experienced racism throughout my life. So it just didn't pop up all of a sudden like some people are making it sound like it did. It didn't just pop up. It's always been there. But it's been implied. And like I said, if you're not the one who's getting the bias toward you and it's implied, you would have no idea. So I just want to cover that because in the news they're really amazing what they talk about. Now, let me go back to my young man who burst in my office. He had obviously some serious stereotypes about people who look like me. And we had numerous conversations. We spent hours actually in counseling sessions talking about how he grew up, small town, like I said, all Caucasian. How did he learn about blacks? You know, what did he learn about blacks? And we talked, like I said, for hours. And believe it or not, after all that talking, he learned to trust me just a little bit. Because he definitely wasn't the young man who flew in my office. How do I know he trusts me? He used to come to my office 4 or 5 times a day, and he would want to know, he would ask me if what his supervisor told him was correct, or if it was a lawful order. So obviously he trusted me to give him the truth, and that's how I know he trusted me. But like I said, it was very little. His behavior changed slightly. It was no big behavior change. So we separated him from the Navy, which was unfortunate for him. He was only in for a couple weeks. Now, believe it or not, I am at the tail end of my talk. And I have a question for all of you. If you see or hear bias, this time you can speak now, I need you to speak to me, in public, what do you do?
Make friends with people who run behind you.
Okay. Make friends, get some allies. Get some allies. That's powerful. Let me tell you, that's very powerful. A bunch of strangers trying to combat bias. That's very powerful.
Especially now when it's people are out holiday shopping.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's probably all kinds of things going on. But I can't even give you answers for some of those things for holiday shopping. What else can you do?
But
Or what else would you do?
Also be brave enough to say to the person, especially in a setting like that where you've got a lot of people around you, that that's inappropriate behavior. And I would ask that person to apologize to the cashier or whoever he was belittling. I mean, life is hard enough
Yes,
at
it is.
Christmas time for somebody working at a cash register
Yes,
during
ma'am.
the holidays. To do that is unconscionable, and I think that given the situation, you could feel safe in numbers because other people are going to say right on and come to your defense.
Get your allies.
Yeah.
It just takes one person to step up. It only takes one person to step up and say, that's inappropriate. You need to rethink what you're talking about. I have one more scenario for you. let's say that you're at a sporting event, a Rangers game. Any Ranger fans in here? Rangers fan? 1, 2. I should have worn my Rangers jersey. I have a Rangers jersey. And who are you for then?
New Jersey.
Oh, please. So let's say you're at a Rangers sporting event and you have some family there and you have some colleagues from work. And somebody says something totally inappropriate. Explicit, no doubt about it. This is what usually happens. The person who thinks or knows that it was inappropriate, what they do is canvass everybody else and look to see if they're going to say something first. So you're hoping like, well, surely Joe over there will say something first. You know, he's very boisterous. And the next thing that happens is nothing. Silence. Silence is consent. Silence is implied agreement. So just as that scenario I just gave you, this person says something explicit. If nobody says anything, then everybody there agreed with what that person said or what that person did, no matter how inappropriate it is. Silence is consent. I hope you take at least one thing out of here. That's a good one to take out of here with you. Another one that I'd like for you to consider taking out of here and sharing with others and using it yourself is to remember, wrong is wrong, even if everyone agrees, and right is right, even if no one agrees. Wrong is wrong, even if everyone agrees, and right is right, even if no one agrees. That just takes one. It just takes one. And the final one had to do with the statistic, I'm sorry, I didn't tell you where I got it from, the American Journal for Public Health. That's where that statistic came from. And this is something else that was in here too that I think is appropriate for you guys. When a community doesn't trust the police, that community becomes more dangerous. And we don't need any more dangerous communities. Some are way too dangerous as it is. So maybe you'll take that one with you and share it with someone. Again, I am humbled that you gave me your time and attention this afternoon. I am humbled by the work that you do. You were talking about the LaSalle School, and that's one of the things I was going to talk about is how awesome that is, right? You help someone who's disadvantaged, who never had the opportunity to give someone they love a gift, and you teach them how to budget money too. You know, that was like a no-brainer to whoever came up with that. That's awesome. And I also wanted to talk about Ronald McDonald House. In the Navy, we were accustomed to Ronald McDonald houses being around bases because that would be when family members would come and go to the doctor and they would need someplace to stay. So your involvement in Ronald McDonald House is totally awesome as well. People probably don't tell you enough how important Ronald McDonald House is, but it is. So I thank you for that. And three more things. One is I have talk assessment sheets here, and I really need you to fill them out. They're easy. There's nothing complicated. Rate the items up here, and if you need to say something about me, that how good I am, and you'll always want me to come back, things such as that. You can put those comments down here in this box. And if for some reason that's not enough room, go ahead and turn it on the back and write away. So I'm going to leave these up here. And also, I want to say or ask you, if your local police department or sheriff's department could use some training similar to what I gave to you today, please give them my information, because I'd love to talk to them and see if I could help them in any way. me my information. Yeah.
I wanted to share with you what you were saying about the local community entrusting of the police
Mm-hmm.
and how critical that is if there isn't trust of the police. And we here in Albany, we have the alert. You're familiar with the alert?
No, I'm not.
Yeah, if you're not, I'm on the alert task force.
Mm-hmm.
It's headed by Pastor David Trame.
Mm-hmm.
He's the pastor of New Horizons Church.
Okay, heard of
And
that.
he's been here. But ALERT stands for the Albany Law Enforcement Resolution Team.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole purpose of ALERT is to develop a relationship outside of crisis with the law enforcement, state, local, district attorney, law enforcement partners, and become true partners.
Absolutely.
As I said, outside of a crisis, so that when something does occur, and things will occur, there's a relationship in place,
Right,
and a development of trust
right.
grows, and we in fact become partners. And in our work with the FBI, for example, the appalling statistic of the lack of minorities in the recruitment process,
Mm-hmm.
and members of that organization that are not minorities has just been uncovered, and what there is that we can do to increase that statistic is something we're in partnership.
Right.
So we're on that and working very, very hard, and something I'd like to invite you to think about, ALERT,
Okay.
and getting in touch with the pastor, and maybe becoming a part
I'm gonna do that.
of that.
Thank you, sir.
We have a summit coming up December 5th.
Okay.
And it's over at the Ramada Inn on Waterville Ave.
Okay.
With the heads of these law enforcement and,
Awesome.
in our group.
Awesome. That would be great. Thank you, sir.
So you'd
Truly
be
appreciate
interested.
it. Yes, I am. That sounds very good. So that's all I have for you this afternoon. Now there's time for questions or comments.
Got one in the back.
Yes, sir.
Well, I have a bias, and I will openly admit I have this bias. Before I mention what it is, just a little background. It's nice that you were in the Navy. My father died in the Navy. I was 6, and I had 2 brothers and a sister. So being brought up on survivors of World War II benefits, we didn't have a lot. Excuse me here, I got this sinus dripping. And so we had to work very hard for everything that we've got. And I started noticing this in high school. It became more apparent in college. And then when I got out in the working world, it just kind of exploded, and you'd notice it. I am biased against lazy people. It has nothing to do with race or religion or nationality, but I can't stand lazy people.
You and me both. I totally agree with that. Yes, I have a huge bias toward that.
That's one of the reasons why I like this group. There's nobody in this room that's lazy.
I believe you. I totally believe you, and I just met you, and I believe nobody else is lazy. Anyone else have a question?
Well, kind of going back to like standing in line, you know, gifts and stuff. And what about like these cultural differences? You know, because we're seeing a huge influx of other cultures that we're not accustomed to, and in their minds, it's perfectly okay to, if it's a male checking out with a female, for the male to show their dominance and berate
Right.
the cashier. How does that play into what they see is right and what we see is wrong, and then it's, you know, $2?
Great question. First of all, none of us are mind readers. Are there any mind readers in here today?
My wife was one.
Oh, okay, all right. I'm glad she's not here today. Like I said, great question. We can't tell what's going on in anyone's head at any time. and there are cultural differences. And the only way you're really going to learn about cultural differences is to have talks like this. And then start talking about some cultural differences that people may or may not be aware of. So you can't read their mind. You don't know that their culture is different in that way. Still, get your allies together. Because I don't care what culture they're from. If it's inappropriate, it's inappropriate. Now, they may not think it is in their world, but now they're in our world. Does that make sense? So that's where you either stand as one or you get your allies together and you all address the bias that's happening. Yes, ma'am.
I work with an Afghan family that came here 2.5 years ago, and I am amazed at how many people are upset because they have come here trying to make a life and they need help. You know, they're struggling, they don't know the language, they don't know the culture, and they're on public assistance temporarily because they have to be. And there are people in our community who can't understand why we're supporting them. And that's just, and they look at me like I'm weird because I'm helping them.
Right.
And that's, you know,
Yeah,
and they're
that's
white.
step one.
They're white, but they're also just very much discriminated against.
Yes. And you'll find that a lot of ethnic groups in this country are discriminated against, particularly when they come from another country. And again, all it is to go talk to them. You know, just go say hi. Just go see what they're about, see what they want to do. Maybe you can even help them. Maybe you can help them get off public assistance and move on further. But you got to be willing to take that step. You have to be willing to take the step. Anyone else?
Start passing these around.
Oh, yes, thank you. I appreciate it. All right, then. I'll be here for a few minutes more. If you had a question you didn't want to ask in front of everyone, I'll be sitting like right where I was sitting, right there in the middle of the table. So I come up with any question or comment. Again, I'm humbled, I'm inspired, and I thank you all so much for having me here this afternoon.
Thank you.